People here probably have some child involved in some kind of club or some kind of sports or some kind of after-school program. That's an extra $225 I'm going to be paying in my taxes. And, you know, it's a stipend, but we already pay for things like bags, you know, sports equipment. I have three other boys that already went through this program, and I didn't have to pay to play for them. So to pay at this point, when we have the kind of assets that we can put into our taxes that'll go across the town for $200,000 just really doesn't make any sense to me. I guess my next question would be, in terms of the school schedule development part where you were saying that money was put back into that piece, how much was that?
It's approximately $50,000.
Okay, for $50,000, for the amount of supervisors, and I'm an educator, for the amount of supervisors that we have in our district, I would highly suggest taking one of our supervisors and doing that school schedule development program. We do not have to outsource something like that. That's why we have supervisors. I work in Moorestown. Our supervisors do all of those things. Make somebody an expert, and I'm sure that it's a schedule. So scheduling development should come from our supervisors or administrators. It should not be $50,000 that's outsourced. Now you're down to $150,000 for pay to play. That's very simple problem that can be solved. And the second thing I wanted to know is, I do believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, we do not have all-day kindergarten here at all. But not extended day. I mean, extended day is in, like at Baker, where they have, what's extended? Okay, so we do have, how many classrooms is that?
This current year, right now, we're almost at 3 classes at Baker, 2 classes in South Valley, and 1 class.
Okay, so we already did that, because that's one of the revenue makers that we use in our district, and I was wondering if that was something that we were going to look into. Okay, great. I was just trying to figure out if there are any other revenue assets. And I highly suggest to the board that you look at other districts that are making revenue outside, because there's a lot of districts that are ahead of us right now. So that would be one of the things that I'd highly suggest looking into. I know our district is going into like a daycare type of situation for our employees to make money. So, you know, that's another way that I think we should be forward thinking right now, and I'm not really sure if we're doing that. So thank you very much.
Good evening, my name is Andrew Roberts. I live at 121 Oakmont Drive. Spoke last week, it seems, and just want to, I think, remark on some of the comments that were made tonight. My first question, I think it's already been asked before, but I'd really like to see a presentation on what it takes to get a decent audio system in here. Because I have to admit, I've been in this room for 3 meetings and a play, and every time we've had AV issues, and to have that issue in a district like this is just an embarrassment. I feel for the kids who have to deal with it on a day-in, day-out basis. So, my first point. My second point is to Mr. Ream. I'd like to continue my thought of history that I brought up last time. I'd like to introduce you, no relative of mine, but this is Mary Roberts. And I'd just like to talk about how far we've come in the last 100 years. And in doing the research to, I guess, question the board, I spent some time on the district website and looked at some of the presentations that the schools had done. And I don't know if you had a chance to do that, but about 100 years ago, 1920, Mary Roberts was chosen by George Baker, another one of our schools, to become the high school principal. Miss Roberts received an additional raise of $1,000. She took that sum and split it among 10 teachers she felt needed it more than her, while she continued her teaching responsibilities. 100 years ago, we had principals that gave back to the community and also taught classes, and I'm not sure, no offense, I'm not sure that we have the same level of commitment these days. And I'm not sure how up to date all the staffing is, but I spent about 2 hours going through the various organizations and the staff that are listed there. in my line of business, when we look at staff cuts, I work for Bank of America, so we're very familiar with how to do how to do more with less. We've been paying a lot of fines. We're all doing 2 or 3 jobs that we had colleagues doing before. So whenever we look at this stuff, the first thing we do is we look at an org chart. And unfortunately, I don't see an org chart. So I had to place one together, and I spent about 2 hours doing it. And from my count, and maybe I'm off by a couple of numbers, we have at least 119 full-time staff in district that don't teach classes. Now, that includes nurses and custodians.
Nurses teach in the elementary level.
I'm sorry?
Nurses teach in the elementary level.
Sorry. But about 120. And I'd like to see some comparisons. The point I'm trying to make. I'm a vice president, Bank of America. My boss is a director. His boss is a senior director. None of us have secretaries. When I look at the staffing in the school district, I see so many secretaries, and I have to wonder, in this day and age, with voicemails and emails and automation of the way we do attendance, have we looked at, do we need this secretary for this vice principal versus cutting a teacher that interacts with my children day in and day out? I'd like to see some justification from that. You mentioned that there'll be 1 FTE in administration as part of the reductions. I'd like to question, I know we're paying for a superintendent who is not here tonight. Is that the FTE elimination that you're talking about?
No.
No. So it's 2 FTEs because we are paying for Brian Betts this year? Is that included in the budget?
He steps into that place, essentially.
Okay. So we're paying 2 this year. We're only paying 1 next year. Is that correct?
We will be paying for 2 for some part of this year. Mr. Reed started in the beginning of February.
Okay. So there's a reduction there. Is that the FTE reduction that you're talking about?
No.
No. So there's additional cost savings there. Is that reflected in the budget?
Yes.
It is. Okay. The outsourcing to Delanco, I think you used the number of $40,000. Is that correct?
Yes.
It is. Have they reduced their business administration staff entirely?
They do not have a business administrator.
So I believe their budget is about $10 million, if my memory serves it correctly. Ours is about 50, right?
Altogether, ours is closer to 70, and I don't believe theirs is quite 10.
So have we done analysis of the ratio of our business administration office versus theirs? Is it in line?
Well, they have some clerical and secretarial staff, and they have a part-time business administrator. But in terms of looking at, I wouldn't compare us to Delanco. I might compare us to other districts that are like size.
And it's, when I challenged you last week to come up with creative solutions, it's these types of creative, not adding 1 teacher here or there. It's looking at the entire picture. And unfortunately, I couldn't print it out because the org chart was so big with all of the administration staff. It's these types of questions that I'm expecting the board to ask. And I'm not an insider. I don't know how these discussions are. I don't know if it's essentially the Board of Ed just looking at the superintendent and the business administrator making these recommendations. But it's these types of hard questions that I'd expect to be asked when we're faced with a budget crisis like this. And I'm not sure that they have, because what I saw, an adjustment last week versus this week, is just focusing on our teachers. I have not heard details on the support staff that could potentially be reduced to save the teachers that interact with our kids day in and day out. Another question I have is, I understand about 2 or 3 years ago, staff has been asked to contribute, has been mandated by law, to contribute to the cost of their benefits. We keep talking about the increased cost of benefits. Can you help me understand how the increased cost benefits were offset by the staff contributions to those expenses?
The Chapter 78 is the name of the law that you're speaking of, and it's phased in over 4 years. So 2014-15 will actually be in the 4th year. So in the first year, staff paid 25% of what their contribution would be. Last year, they paid 50% of what their contribution would be. This year, they're paying 75%, and next year, they'll pay 100% of what their required contribution will be.
Right. So did we not get some relief from the increased cost benefits from those contributions?
The contributions are not, unfortunately, the cost of the premiums are rising higher than the cost of the contributions.
Right.
And, it's not enough of it certainly helps, but it's not enough of an offset.
Lynn, can you define contribution?
Yeah, the contribution, it's hard to categorize it because it literally is a separate calculation for every employee in the district.
Right.
It's a sliding scale. It's based on your level of income and your level of coverage.
Right.
And so employees that make less pay less of a percentage, whereas employees that are higher on the salary scale pay more of a percentage towards the cost of their benefits.
Is that broken out in your budget, on a line item that we can analyze?
It is not broken out in the budget because it would be too cumbersome to do all those, but we do have a separate spreadsheet.
And those contributions are put directly into our school budget? They don't go into an overall fund or anything like that?
They don't. What we do is we offset the health benefits expenses by them.
Okay. The last question I have is I understand when we did lose Brian Betts that you stepped in as acting superintendent. I assume that your assistant business administrator stepped up to your role and performed your duties?
She did not.
So you were performing both duties?
Yes.
Okay. It seems that in my business, where we have surplus capacity like that, where we have the ability to have people, that is the first place that we look for reductions. My question directly to you is are there going to be reductions in your staff? Because it sounds like you had excess capacity to be acting superintendent and business administrator.
What? I'm not sure why you just said that. What if she, Mrs. Sugars, simply started working twice as hard?
Then I'd expect her to continue doing that, because we're all working twice as hard these days.
But you're not even considering that she might have been working at 110% of her capacity to begin with.
Then we are all working at extra capacity.
I agree, so am I. But that doesn't mean that you can automatically assume that because she was able to do both, that there's just excess capacity.
I'm sorry, what was the term that was used when you're increasing class? It's efficiencies? Was that the word that was used? So I think there's potential efficiencies that could be done there in light of the excess capacity that we potentially have. One last quote I'd like to read, and this is from you, Mr. Mishler, from a July 19th, 2011 press release where you justified not increasing taxes. To quote Don Mishler, board president noted that the additional state funding provided the board with an unprecedented opportunity to provide relief to taxpayers while maintaining financial stability. To me, the last 3 years has not felt like financial stability. It felt like financial crisis, and we continue to experience financial crisis. I've charted out, and I think you tried to address what I'm about to say earlier in your comments tonight, but I had charted out if we'd gone to cap each of the last 3 years, that we would have a surplus of $5 million today. Now, maybe we didn't have to go to full cap the last 3 years. Maybe we wouldn't have eroded the surplus that we've had over the last 3 years, but it's this, I want to use the word erosion again. It's this constant erosion. 3 years ago, we took a couple teachers away and a couple what I would say critical programs away. We're doing it again this year. We're talking about doing it again next year. I've been paying taxes for 20 years. I've been paying taxes while your children had the benefit of all these programs, while your children did not have to pay to play. This is the first year my daughter is playing school sports. After 20 years of paying taxes so that society could enjoy these things, now they're being taken away from my children, and that's why I'm fighting tonight. I'm fighting for my children for the combined 25 years that they're going to spend in this district. I don't intend to leave. I want to maintain the level that we have come to expect. I want to draw a line in the sand saying that we have to do something to maintain, not erode the quality of Moorestown education. And if that involves, as I'm suggesting, maybe taking away some administration so we can keep staff that provide these services, I would suggest it may be time to start looking at that. Because from what I saw in your presentation tonight, we're not doing that. And I believe that's a mistake. So I would implore the Board of Ed to take a look, Mr. Tate, to take a look at all of the overhead and see where we can make reductions that don't directly impact the education of our children. Thank you.
Stacy Balderson, Bartram Road. I'd add a couple comments to add on to the pay-to-play. I think the comment on the tax base was that with the 2% cap, we go up about $141 per household. I don't understand why you don't take that $200,000 and put it into the tax base. You could ask the county for an increase above the 2% tax cap if you had to, or take it out of the surplus. But I think it's ridiculous to spread that $200,000 over the students. You can go over your cap if you need to. All you have to do is ask the county, and you're well aware of that. Second thing, on the 5.5 FTEs at the high school, I'm appalled that you're thinking about cutting language arts, science, social studies, and math. The core curriculum, that's where you're going to cut your FTEs. That's where you're going to cut your FTEs, is that correct?
We're not cutting those programs.
You're cutting FTEs from those programs.
We're raising class sizes.
You're raising class sizes so that it's more difficult for students to get the one-on-one basis they need. You're already at 25 at the high school.
And we're at 25 in the elementary.
And let me remind you, there were a number of students that stood up here to talk about Mr. Sinatra. He's a 1.5 year teacher. I'm certain he would be on the chopping block for one of those things. If you ran the school district as you ran a business and you did things on experience and not on experience, you did it on performance, you wouldn't have these kinds of issues. Just a sidebar. The other thing is, you know, if you look at your website, you say we have an 11.5 to 1 ratio. I am assuming when you say 11.5 to 1, while you're talking about class sizes of 25 to 1, you're obviously adding in your administration to that, which is a bit deceiving in terms of your touch points with the students. The other piece is when we're thinking about cutting teachers. While our math programs are very good, I would challenge you to look at our language arts programs. If you've looked at the test scores lately, you see those language arts test scores are not going up. They're either stable or going down, and I really would challenge you to look at your language arts program. I think it falls short of what other districts are doing, and I can personally speak by looking at my own children's language arts test scores that they are nowhere near the math programs in the Moorestown School District.
Hi, I just want to say thank you for your service. I'm sorry? Dana Selbach, 145 Holmes Terrace. I want to start by thanking you for your service. I think it's a thankless job. I know it. Creating a budget in this climate is not easy. And I, like Dave and Mark, who spoke earlier, and other faces in the room, grew up in this town. My education was here, K to 12. I'm here because of these schools. Trust me, it was a fight to move here with my husband. He was like, it's ridiculous to spend that money. And I said, there is no price we can put on our schools and our son's education. And that's why we're here. And I know that I speak for many when I say that. And I have to say, my son is now in 4th grade at the UES, and we could not be more pleased with his education thus far. He was at Baker. He succeeded very well with many diverse teachers, many of whom I wouldn't have chosen for him, but served him well. And I recently, the past few months, have spoken with a friend who's a fellow educator, actually an administrator in another district in our state. She and her husband just put their dream home that they built 8 years ago on the market because they weren't happy with their school district. So she's been talking with me about Moorestown and our schools, and I bragged and bragged, and she's decided to move here. Their house is already, they've had an offer, it's been on the market for a week. And I sat here tonight and I was appalled that so many important programs were on the chopping block. And I was embarrassed that I bragged. I'm glad to see that you've found the money to restore them, or I know you didn't find it, but you've shifted it. Our music and our world language are very important. I know there are many other issues have been spoken tonight. I applaud our teachers and our administrators and you. I guess you're administrators too. But I applaud you and your efforts, and I just ask that you really consider a cart class size. I think to call it efficient is an oxymoron. It's not efficient. And any educator and really any person who's gone to school has to know that. And I also ask these times when state testing is what counts, apparently. I don't agree with that, but let's face it, that's what we value. That's what the world values right now, or our country values. And we're gonna put that on the line, like class size? That's gonna be the greatest impact on our kids and our tests. And to say that our curriculum is driving this, our curriculum is driven by testing. It's a fact, it's a sad fact, but it is what it is. And I think we have to put the money where it is going to best serve our kids, and that's in the teachers and the staff and the administrators. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I must have scared everybody away. Thank you for hearing me tonight. My name is Elizabeth Hughes. I live at 311 Pleasant Valley Avenue. I came originally tonight to address you about the paraprofessionals situation, which, despite, Mr. Mishler, your assurances that it's not been discussed, up until now, your stance on outsourcing paraprofessionals has been pretty vague. And the slide presentation that you put forth, Ms. Sugars, in February, really didn't specify exactly what restructuring our paraprofessionals really meant. And for those of us who have children in the elementary schools, or special needs parents, we know that the people involved in our programs, the teachers, the paraprofessionals, people in SPEAC, they've been talking about the possibility that you would outsource these paraprofessionals for quite some time. So basically, I apologize for the abruptness of it, but I felt the need to call you out. So I created the petition on change.org so that you could see exactly what the community thinks about this. I have to agree with the gentleman who spoke before me. I'm not going to say it with so many facts or anything, but it seems to me like you guys, year after year, are cutting the lean rather than the fat. You have administrators, directors who have had 80% of their staff outsourced, and yet they continue to make insane salaries and bonuses every year. If we added up just the administrative director's salaries, it would be pretty embarrassing to say that you need to lay off 5 people last